Hey there, it's Dr. Sarah. Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with our very own Dr. Alicia. She's sharing with me her birth stories. One is a post-dates vaginal delivery, and the other an unplanned emergency cesarean section. She also shares her experience of having a baby in a NICU and a toddler at home. If you're pregnant and starting to think about your birth, you should check out our online prenatal masterclass that takes you from pregnancy through to parenthood. We talk about everything you need to know in the weeks leading up to delivery, the birth experience itself, and we also have a huge section dedicated to preparing yourself for that fourth trimester. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to our website, www.shefoundhealth.com/masterclass. We'll get into the podcast and Dr. Alicia's birth story right after this.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are Sarah and Alicia, two doctor moms who are creating a community rich with high quality information to support people through the journey from pregnancy to parenthood.
Our goal is to empower with knowledge and decrease the anxieties during this time in our lives. We cover topics from fertility through the fourth trimester, with the odd birth story sprinkled in.
Come join us on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood or check us out on our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca.
Some of these podcasts have been sponsored, which allows us to continue putting out free, amazing content. But don't worry, this won't affect our advice or recommendations, and we only partner with companies we know and trust, or have come highly recommended to us by you, our listeners.
She Found Health is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information you hear does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any institution with which we are affiliated. All right, guys, welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. I am super stoked today to be interviewing our very own Dr. Alicia about her birth story. So as you know, she asked me and we talked all about my birth story, I think for the very first birth story podcast that we did. Yep.
So now it's my turn to hear all about Dr. Alicia's pregnancy and her birth stories.
I'm nervous.
I know, you're so cute. I know it's, you know what, I was talking to, we haven't released it yet, or maybe we will have by the time this comes out, but I chatted with the mama psychologist and we just talked about how there's just something that's so visceral about talking about your pregnancy and your birth, right? And I think if you haven't been through that experience, there's just something, right? It's so intimate. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for you to talk with us.
Thanks, buddy. I'm excited too as
right?
well.
Okay. So let's start by talking about why Guy and all about, getting pregnant, your pregnancy and how things went.
All right. So I was very lucky in the fact that I apparently am extremely fertile. This is my husband. So we essentially, my poor husband, we got, not poor because we got pregnant right away, but I was very diligent. It's like, pure power, come here now.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
But luckily for him, that only lasted a couple of weeks because we got pregnant like within a couple of weeks, both pregnancies.
Wow. Yeah.
So I had an IUD prior. So pulled out the IUD prior to both kids, both pregnancies, pulled out the IUD and got pregnant right away. So we were extremely lucky in that sense. Mm-hmm. Also extremely lucky that I've never had a pregnancy loss either. So I feel very blessed around that piece. Because I've seen so many women go through that and and their partners, right?
Yeah.
It's such a challenge. So very lucky in both respects. Yeah. So got pregnant with Wyatt and had a pretty easy pregnancy, to be honest. I had 1 2-hour stint of nausea when I was working with one of my good friends who had horrible nausea in her early pregnancy. And we were due a couple of weeks apart. So we were very similar in gestational age. And she was sitting in the office and she was just feeling gross. And so I think I had a little bit of sympathy nausea, but that was about it. Super easy pregnancy. Did do some prenatal screening, which all came back fine, except I grow children with no nasal bones.
Oh, that's so funny.
Isn't it? Both of them, neither of them had nasal bones early in the pregnancy, which was one of the markers of kind of chromosomal abnormalities, but everything turned out fine. And he's got a normal nasal bone now, in case anyone's wondering. But at my 20-week ultrasound, I was diagnosed with placenta previa with Wyatt, which was unexpected, but I mean, it's not an abnormal thing. And up to that point, I'd been exercising pretty regularly. I felt pretty good.
No bleeding.
No bleeding, no concerns whatsoever. So that was kind of the one complication with Wyatt. And so then we did a follow-up ultrasound at kind of 32-ish weeks, and it had moved. And so that was totally fine. It was a bit of a bummer. I'm going to say this. I was really horny in pregnancy. So the fact that
you can't
pelvic rest was very
no sex, no orgasms.
A bit frustrating.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
and then is that a bummer?
And then as we got further along, my husband was less than excited to, he thought he was going to be poking.
I know
Wyatt's
everyone's
head.
so worried about poking the baby. That won't happen.
But we figured other stuff out. So no, not a big deal at the end. TMI, everybody.
No, it's good.
If you guys know Pure Power, don't tell them I told you guys
normalize pregnancy and
right.
all the hormonal changes that come along with it.
Anyway, so I worked till about 39 weeks.
Did you do overnights too?
Yeah. Not till 30. I think I stopped overnights at 36 weeks or so.
Hardcore.
But they were certainly rough.
Yeah.
But anyways, worked until about 39 weeks. And then I was off and I asked a colleague of mine, what am I going to do with myself?
That's so you.
I don't know. Gosh, what am I going to do with myself? And she's like, just relax, just sit. It was summertime, springtime. Just sit in the backyard with a book and just read a book. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. Why would I do that? I got all this energy. I got all this time. What am I going to do? Anyways, hindsight's 2020. Wish I had listened to her because I haven't read a book since Wyatt was born. Yeah. So pregnancy was good. Placenta moved out of the way. So raring to go, ready to have a baby at 39 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we waited and we waited and we waited. And at 41 and 2 weeks, I went and got acupuncture from the amazing Stephanie Curran at Elements of Health. And I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was just that I was 41 and 2, but I was shopping 2 hours later and broke my water in the shopping mall.
And was it like one of those dramatic gush?
No. It was just a little bit of a gush. And so I went into the hospital to kind of confirm. I called my doctor, went into the hospital to confirm. And one of our colleagues actually was a resident at that point.
Yeah.
So she was looking and there wasn't obvious. And she went and took the slide back because you look for ferning, what we call it, on a slide. And she went back and she came back. She said, Alicia, I looked so hard. I saw one tiny fern. It's like, thank you.
That's all you need.
Dr. Harmon.
Yeah.
Anyways, went home and nothing happened.
So you were GBS negative.
GBS negative.
Yeah.
Went home, nothing happened. So the next morning I called up labor delivery to ask if I could come in for induction because at that point we were waiting 24 hours. So they brought me in and we started the induction process.
And so how did that go? Did you, I presume at that point it was oxytocin that you were given?
Yeah. So they started an IV and had some oxytocin and I think it kind of worked relatively. I think I went in at like 10. So I was having kind of uncomfortable contractions. Uncomfortable contractions. I've realized I don't have much of a pain tolerance through this.
Yeah, but no.
Which is fine. So then I got some morphine and Gravol. My husband went home and walked the dog. He came back. I was kind of in and out, resting in between. And then I was progressing though. So that was great with the oxytocin going. And then I was probably about, 8 or 9 centimeters and I had some fentanyl. So that must have been Wyatt was born at 10 p.m. So that must have been around 7 p.m.
And I got to interrupt you. If you were able to have oxytocin and you didn't get an epidural, I think you've got a pretty high pain tolerance.
Well, I don't know about that. But
everyone's labors are so different,
right?
I couldn't labor without epidurals and I didn't have oxytocin.
And my plan was to get an epidural going in, but then I was okay.
You were fine. Yeah.
So lots of different positions. Hands and knees was awesome. Just rested and kind of walked around. Yeah. So it was good. It was a great labor. And then I was fully dilated about, 8 p.m. I'm pulling things back. And I pushed for a couple of hours. About an hour into pushing, it was getting pretty uncomfortable. And Wyatt, my lovely Wyatt, was sunny side up. So he was OP at the beginning of pushing, which makes it harder to push them out. So I asked for a pudendal block, which is when they freeze the nerves that supply your vulva. So it's a needle that they put in the vagina and freeze the nerve. So one side worked, the other side did not.
And how was it?
Well, the one side that worked was great. The side that didn't sucked.
Yeah.
But I only had a half a ring of fire. So the obstetrician was hanging out. I was high as a kite on and off at this point, right, guys? And working really hard, kind of paying attention, kind of not. This was my opportunity that I experimented with drugs, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways. And then I used the gas too. You're right. Yeah. And so the obstetrician was kind of standing beside me in front of the monitor.
Okay.
Now we're all kind of friends. So I don't know if he was hanging out just to hang out or if he was
Well, you're, like,
hiding the
pushing
monitor
out your
from me. I
baby.
don't really remember that there was any major concern, but Wyatt was delivered with a nuchal cord twice around his head.
So he's probably having D-cells.
Yeah. So originally Kier was going to cut the cord, but that needed to be cut pretty quick. So yeah, I think he was having D-cells, and then he was he was not vigorous. He was
That's scary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew he'd be okay, but anyways, so then he was brought to the warmer. So he was put on my belly, and I was flicking his foot as they were rubbing him, right? I was trying to stimulate him. That's how we stimulate them, kind of flick their foot, rub them. But he still wasn't kind of breathing. So he was taken to the warmer, and by then the pediatrician had come. They did a little bit of a support, gave him a little bit of extra support to breathe and stuff, and he perked up really quickly. And then he came back. My placenta delivered easily, and I had a little bit of a tear. And so that all kind of got sewn up. And at the end of it, my husband said, I don't believe anybody survives this. I am amazed that anybody survives childbirth. He had not taken any kind of prenatal class because he was just relying on me and colleagues.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't think he was quite prepared for that, which is birth, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so all worked out well. Wyatt and I went home a couple days later. It was all fine.
How's breastfeeding?
Breastfeeding was a challenge.
Yeah.
Now, with neither of my children did I go into labor.
Yeah.
So I wonder, and breastfeeding was not, I wasn't a big milk producer. My milk looked like translucent. So I went back to work at 3 months postpartum and still breastfeeding and pumping with some formula supplementation as well. But there was 3 of us who were pumping at the same time.
So funny.
And so we would put our because we have nowhere to put our milk in the hospital, nowhere to pump. We'd pump on the toilet. It's horrible. We're working on a team, but it's like horrible. So our milk would be sitting side by side in the fridge, in the staff lunch fridge. Yeah. Which I'm sure is not legal in terms of VIHA. Who knows? Anyways, mine would be like gray translucent. The next one would be like half fat, half milk. And the other one would be like 2/3 fat, 1/3 milk. It was quite interesting, but that's fine. We are.
And you know, the benefits of breast milk are so huge that even if they just get drops or they get, you know, an ounce of your translucence, they're still getting all the goodness.
Totally. Yeah. So breastfeeding was okay. It was fine. If I'd known then what I know now about kind of hand expression and the first few hours of skin to skin, which we did do, but like hand expressing really early on, I think it would have gone better, but it went fine. And I went back to work early and just logistics. So we used some formula supplementation and my, skim milk. My babies were on like the 3rd percentile, growing, but on the 3rd percentile.
Which is funny because your husband is.
Well, they're both tall. 97th percentile tall.
No, isn't that
3rd
crazy?
percentile weight.
Oh, bless them.
Tall and skinny little suckers they were. But doing well. So, and then Wyatt was diagnosed with cow's milk protein allergy. Which didn't help the milk production because then I was off all dairy and like it's so hard to get your fats in when you're doing that. And he was on medication for reflux as well. Yes. So that was all fine. Everything resolved. He's happy and healthy now. But that was
and how many years old is he now?
He's 8.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to work. How long did you breastfeed for?
7 months. Both of my children at 7 months, they just decided not interested anymore.
Totally fine.
So there you go.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
So when did you guys decide it was time to go through that birth experience again?
I was ready like 3 or 4 months postpartum.
Yeah.
It was so interesting. But we waited, they're 22 months apart. So yeah. So we waited just under a year. I had an IUD again. I took birth control pills for a bit. And then I had an IUD put in again before Evie because they worked really well for me. Yeah. And so we pulled it. I pulled it. He didn't really know we were trying. He was game. Don't worry, everybody. I didn't sneak
I thought you meant you physically pulled it out. I was like, how did you do that?
I went to my doctors. They removed the IUD for me. Some people, anyways. And Kier looked at me one day. He's like, you have acne. You never have acne. Are you pregnant? And I was like, and then I went and took a pregnancy test and I was.
So funny.
Kier diagnosed my 2nd pregnancy.
Good for him. No, got to give that guy some credit.
Yeah. And then the other person who diagnosed it was one of our obstetrician colleagues because I was called in at 2 a.m. for an emergency cesarean section. So I got out of bed when I was about 7 weeks pregnant, went in the middle of the OR, fainted.
Oh, you never fainted.
Or almost fainted.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need a chair. And he's like, Alicia, do you have something to tell us? It's like, congratulations to me. Anyways.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. And then Evie, again, no nasal bone. I did some screenings, some early ultrasound, no nasal bone, and she had a thickened back of her neck as well as the no nasal bone. So we had some extra tests done, but again, everything came back fine.
Did you do an amnio or?
No, we just did the
NIPT?
non-invasive prenatal test. Yeah. So we did that. Everything came back fine. And one of our lovely colleagues did another good scan at 20 weeks just to make sure everything was like looking really good and everything looked fine.
That's stressful.
Yeah.
You're not a worrier like me though. You don't have the anxiety that Sarah has. I feel like I would have been super stressed.
I mean, it wasn't not stressful, but no control over it.
No, I know.
So once we got the reassuring NIPT back, we were very reassured.
That's good.
And we'd already gone through
the same
Wyatt with no nasal bone. So we knew like it was a bit less worrisome in that respect.
I'm such a worrier. I'd be freaking out.
But the colleague of ours who did the scan, she knew what we were having, but I didn't want to know.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I think she had a bit of a challenge keeping that a secret for the rest of the time. But anyways, and then with Evie, I also had a placenta previa.
That's funny, hey?
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, sometimes we don't know, right? Yeah. There are risk factors and then there just is.
So I don't make oxytocin and I like to grow my placentas over my cervix. Yeah. So again, Evie, a pretty good pregnancy, like no major aches, like a little bit of a sore back. I remember 28 weeks. I was like a bit grumpy and Kier's like, have you been wearing your pregnancy support belt? And I was like, oh, good idea. And I put that on and made a world of difference. Just in my kind of how I held myself and back pain and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So with Evie, my placenta didn't move. So it was still low lying. So it was not over the cervix, but it was a centimeter away from my cervix. And so I actually had an appointment on the Monday to go talk to the obstetrician about vaginal delivery versus a planned cesarean section.
And it was a centimeter?
1 centimeter away. And so
that's pretty close.
And I was supposed to be assisting in the OR on that Monday at 37 weeks, but I canceled my OR assisting because one, like what happens last minute if I do go into labor, I felt bad. And also then I had this appointment. So Sunday night at 2 a.m. at 37 weeks, 4.5 weeks earlier than Wyatt, I broke my water.
That is not a usual story, right? Usually history repeats itself. Yeah.
Evie's feisty. On April 1st.
Of course.
On April 1st.
Thanks, Evie.
So anyways, the person who was because we don't have family in town, so the person who was going to care for Wyatt, we weren't really expecting it to happen this early. So their husband snores and is hard of hearing. It's like our grandparents in town. So she had moved out of the bed, left her phone there, which she had next to her, moved into a different room. He's hard of hearing, so couldn't hear. So Kier was struggling to find childcare. I have this low-lying placenta, and who knows if I'm supposed to have a C-section or try for vaginal delivery.
Because you were supposed to see the obstetrician on the Monday, and this was the Saturday before.
No, it was the night before.
Oh, the night before.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I irresponsibly, I know everybody, no judgment, drove myself into the hospital.
I was teasing.
I wasn't bleeding at that point. So
that's fine.
Drove myself into the hospital, got chastised by the nurses because of my irresponsibility of driving myself into the hospital. Anybody who has a very low lying placenta, call an ambulance. Safety first, or placenta previa, call an ambulance. Anyways, got to the hospital. And the obstetrician who I was supposed to actually see the next day happened to be there. So he did an ultrasound scan and we kind of talked about risks and benefits and like, well, I've already had a normal vaginal delivery. Let's see what happens. I'm in the hospital. We'll start an intravenous. We'll go from there. So that was about kind of 2 or 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning.
And when did Kier, was he able to find
childcare? So he got another friend of ours who has their phone on to come over and sleep in our house. And then he came into the hospital.
Because Wyatt was pretty little.
Yeah, he was
not even 2. Yeah.
So then the decision was made that I would try to labor and have a vaginal delivery, except I, as we have discovered, don't produce oxytocin. So then I needed to be induced. So we waited until the planned sections and everything was safe on the ward because there was a good potential that I'd need an emergency cesarean section if I started bleeding. So we waited till the ward kind of was safe to start some oxytocin. So that was kind of around 11 in the morning. And I started contracting. And then the anesthesiologist, who's, friends of ours, was there and we were chatting. And then I just felt something dripping down my leg. And I didn't stop the conversation, just kept dripping down my leg. Drip, 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 drip. And so then I asked him to go get my doctor, who then came and I was bleeding, not insignificantly. So then we went to the operating room. And
how was the tracing?
Oh, Evie was fine. Heart rate was fine. Yeah. Again, just tough little sucker, that one. So then we went to the operating room and the obstetrician on call, who had done my previous scan.
Oh, nice.
The lovely Dr. Boss.
Oh, yeah.
Checked me and I was dilated. I was about 4 to 5 centimeters dilated, but the placenta was sticking down past my cervix.
Oh my gosh, Alicia.
So,
honestly.
I know, right?
Right?
So we did an emergency cesarean section. Evie was fine through this whole time, but 37 weeks. So we did an emergency cesarean section, which I thought went swimmingly.
And so you got a spinal for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So not emergency that I didn't need a general anesthetic.
Yeah.
It wasn't that rush because Evie was fine, but we needed to move on things.
Yeah.
So I got a spinal anesthetic, which is a very weird feeling. Like it is a very odd feeling.
It is. Well, I had epidurals, which are
exactly,
very similar.
right?
Yeah.
But worked really well. Apparently there was a bit of challenge stopping the bleeding. So I ended up having a balloon placed up into my uterus and blown up to put pressure on the uterus to help stop the bleeding. And Evie,
how'd she do?
She's such a lovely creature. She was not really super psyched about breathing.
Yeah.
She was breathing really quick. She was 37 weeks. It's not super full term, still a little early. Yeah. She didn't go under the stress of labor, which helps to mature lungs. And so she needed to go to the NICU, which she resolved from breathing part pretty quickly thereafter. Yeah. Right. Every time I tried to go to the NICU, I went right after delivery. So I think there's a post on our Facebook account of me holding her in the NICU. Yeah. So that was like right after delivery. They wheeled me there and I got to hold her and illegally tried to breastfeed her because she had the breathing equipment on. You're not supposed to do that.
Don't do that.
Anyways, legally tried to do that just to kind of, because I knew I had challenges with my supply with Wyatt. So I wanted to do my best anyways. Yeah. And then I went to the antpartum unit.
Because you had
I had the balloon in my uterus stopping the bleeding. So that was kind of that. I tried to go. So my husband would go to the NICU and he ended up deciding on the name because he'd seen her and I hadn't really. Yeah. So we had two. He chose Evelyn. Yeah. Evie, we call her. And then every time I tried to go, I would pretty much almost faint.
Yeah, because on the way lost a lot of blood,
and it was just like overwhelming blood pressure and everything, right?
And
so I didn't actually see her again until like 48 hours later. I think.
Oh, Alicia, that's so hard.
It is what it is. Yeah. Anyways, but she was doing well. But she was still in the highest acuity, still getting a little bit of support breathing, and that was probably one of the hardest things. Is we were happy, we were joyous, but we couldn't celebrate because other babies come to start crying.
In that NICU.
We're fighting for their lives, right? I know. So it was a very strange feeling. So anyways.
Now you got me crying.
I know, right? But yeah, so she did really well. I stayed in the hospital for about a week because I was hoping that she would be able to come home with me. Yeah. But in her feistiness, once she went down to, she had jaundice. We treated the jaundice. And then she went to the feed and grow room. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And she was there for another 2.5 weeks because she had such bad heartburn that every time she would, like after feeding or lying flat, she'd get acid reflux, which would then slow her heart rate and her breathing rate. Right. So she'd have what we call apneas and brady's. Yeah. She would come out of herself. She didn't need any medication. She was fine, but they couldn't discharge her home until she had 3 or 5 days without any, those. Right.
I know.
And she kept having them, but didn't need any help to get out of them. Anyway, so after 3 weeks of this, which is when my colleague and I started Grow Health, because what else are you going to do when you're in the hospital all day but plan
a new clinic, right?
Worked like a hot dart. No wonder I didn't do well with breastfeeding. Oh. Anyway, so after 3 weeks, pediatrician was like, okay, enough is enough. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. So we got discharged home, which was great. And at that point, we kind of chatted with the pediatrician whether we should get one of those mattress monitors that monitor their oxygen saturations and their movements. Yeah. And they said don't, because they go off, so they cause so much more anxiety.
Like Angel Care, and
then they're worse. Yeah. So we came home. She had really bad reflux, so she was on medication for that. And she came home with this wedge that we were supposed to strap her into.
Oh yeah,
to kind of keep her
a little bit up.
Yeah. Which was a challenge. Anyway, so that was kind of the boobaloo, as we like to call Evie. Yeah. So it was, it all worked out well. And I think a big thing that I learned out of that experience is my expectations especially going into Wyatt's delivery, were super low. Yeah. Like my birth plan was literally go post dates, get induced, have a failed induction, them have to or get to fully, but then have to try to forceps, have a failed forceps, have a stat cesarean section, and end up with a post-op wound infection. Yeah. Wyatt was always fine in my birth story, but like that was what I was expecting going in. Yeah. And then I had like a relatively normal-ish delivery with him. Yeah. And I had a little things, but it was Yeah. And then Evie's delivery, I was expecting not quite as dramatic. Yeah. I was kind of expecting to have a vaginal delivery.
Yeah, of course you were, because you had one before. And
anyways, so it didn't go, but still, like, looking back on it, it was still a great, even though it was fraught with challenges, and anybody else, I think, with that story that wasn't like in the world of labor delivery, it would be like,
it could be really
hugely traumatizing, right? But because I had kind of realistic expectations and I knew all the possibilities going in, I still have fond memories of it. Like, I don't dwell on the negatives, which there were for sure, but I just remember the really positive things. And so I think it's such an important piece for pregnant people to recognize that things don't always go as we planned, but as long as we're aware of the potentials and have the right goal, I think, in mind of a healthy mom and a healthy babe or a healthy family coming out of it, that whatever does happen, you can manage it and deal with it and adjust what is going on. You can still have your hopes.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? Like, I'd hope that I had a quick vaginal second baby delivery and go home 2 hours later. That was my hope for Evie.
Of course.
Didn't happen. 3 weeks later. But I think and that's why you and I have started this, right? Is because we want to really bring forth realistic expectations and understanding what the process is like, and knowing that things don't always go sideways, but we're so privileged to live in a society that we have support and we can intervene and we can make sure the vast majority of time the outcomes are good, even if they don't go as we expect. And so that was really brought home to me through both of my deliveries, frankly, because neither of them were like the
sort of like uncomplicated, spontaneous.
I'm hand quoting here. Normal vaginal delivery, like normal deliveries,
I don't like that
right?
term.
But
I don't.
Really, they both were special and wonderful to me in their own way.
Exactly.
Right. So
there
you go. My birth stars.
So I'm going to ask you the questions we always ask everybody. What was the what do you think was the best thing about becoming a parent, a new mom?
Having them on me. Seeing them.
I know, right?
Even though they were both immediately taken away. And then eventually having them back on me again. You know, and relishing those times of like just hanging out on the couch. One of my favorite memories is with Wyatt. My husband and I downloaded, what's the book? Stephen King's book. It's super long and it's about a time traveler.
Oh, I don't know.
And so I would breastfeed and Kier would come lie on the couch and we would listen to this audiobook as we were doing that. And that's like one of my favorite memories of that time. So I think just kind of really relishing that quiet time,
being in the moment,
which is really bad for me. I'm horrible at quiet time.
I know. I love hearing that you did that.
I know, but that was one of my like fondest memories of that period.
It's interesting. Hey, you look back. And what do you think the hardest thing was?
Oh, breastfeeding. 1 week after like day 5, I think it was, you got your baby blues.
I know.
My skinny babies are skinny babies. Your nipples are kind of ravaged because you have this human being sucking on them, and me not doing any kind of learning really about breastfeeding beforehand, not knowing about hand expression, not knowing about all these techniques that could have helped me. And I remember like midnight, I walk out and like, Kier, go get some bottles. He's like, now? I was like, yes. It's like, okay. Took him an hour to find something.
I know. In the middle of the night.
So
and I think that's really common. And how do you think I think we kind of touched on it, but how do you think your sort of career and sort of life trajectory has changed since you became a mom? I mean, you did maternity care before. Do you think things have changed since becoming a mom in the way you provide care?
100%. 100% in the way I provide care and my outlook into how people make decisions for themselves. You know, like, sure, there's what the literature says, but you also have to make the right decision for your family.
Totally.
And that's going to be different for every single family. And that's totally fine. So as a care provider, I think I have a lot more knowledge in terms of like, just like day-to-day baby stuff, right?
Sleep, breastfeeding, diapers.
All those like logistic potty training, whatever. But I think also my ability to recognize that every family is different and the choices people make are very much dependent on their family. And we all need to be respectful of that and work within that realm more, both as human beings, but also as care providers. So I think that's the biggest change.
Yeah, I know. It's an incredible journey, right?
No, it's a wild ride.
We're still riding.
Still riding for the rest of our lives, I think. Gosh,
I know.
Once you become a parent, or once you even think about becoming a parent.
Oh, totally. Right?
Anyway, so
Well, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for making me cry, buddy. It doesn't happen very often.
I know, guys. Oh, that's pretty special.
Miss Boobaloo. That's Evie.
I know.
She's got quite the name.
Oh,
Eva Lion, Flash Speed, Boo Boo Power, Cannonball, Froggy, Dynamite.
That's a great nickname.
Not on her birth certificate, but
okay. Thanks for listening, everyone.
thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.